Your soulmate is attempting to convey a significant message to you. Read this message right away. Your soulmate is attempting to share something significant with you, my dear child, but each time they muster the bravery, something prevents them. More times than you can think, they have revised the message. They've been staring at your name, wondering if this is the right time to tell you everything. And you wouldn't believe how much emotion they are withholding. Avoid skipping. There is a hint in the first few moments of this voyage that nearly everyone misses. You were pulled to this place today for a purpose that relates to an unfinished conversation with your love. They ask themselves the same question over and over. What happens if I wait too long? With each day that goes by, the weight of that question increases. They no longer fear their emotions. They fear they won't have time to inform you before everything changes in life. However, why hasn't this message been revealed until now? You might be surprised at how close the solution is. However, it is still encased in one last hesitancy that they have failed to go past. Your love made a silent choice that altered everything, somewhere between fear and hope. Rather of acting as though everything was all right, they began focusing on every reminder that brought you into their thoughts, whether it was a music they knew, a chance conversation, or a location they hadn't been to in months. The same message seemed to be whispered in every instant. Give up running. They recognized these emotions were no longer fleeting, which scared them. It was getting harder to ignore them. Another piece of this story is going to come together, so stay until the very end. Your lover is frantically trying to explain something to you. Perfection is not the goal. Expecting you to save them is not the point. It's about acknowledging at last that your presence has given them a sense of tranquility they have looked for everywhere but have never really found. They still question if you would trust them if they told the truth. Or would your mutual quiet deepen till neither of you knows how to end it? Because of what it says, the message they have been conveying is not dramatic. Because it took so long to say it, it is strong. They've come to the point where it hurts more to hide behind ambiguity than to face reality. They realize deep down that they can't continue to act as though your connection is meaningless. Every postponed word has turned into another restless night, an incomplete thought, a quiet prayer that you would somehow comprehend without more explanation. This is just the beginning of what they have been attempting to expose, so something enormous is waiting for you. They have repeatedly practiced one particular sentence. However, it has never been said out loud. Everything between you could start to alter the instant that sentence finally leaves their hearts. Before they can say those words, though, they are about to be forced to make a decision they never thought they would have to make due to an unexpected epiphany. And whether or not you receive this eagerly anticipated communication will depend on your decision. The quiet could not endure indefinitely. Your sweetheart came to the realization that holding out for the ideal opportunity had turned into a pretext for avoiding the truth. The message in their hearts only got louder every day they put it off. They started reading things they had forgotten, reopening old discussions, and recalling small events that had appeared unremarkable but suddenly felt unforgettable. Have you ever pondered why, despite your best efforts to move on, some people continue to cross your mind? They asked themselves the same question, and they were uncomfortable with the response. It wasn't a coincidence. It was not inquisitiveness. It was the increasing awareness that you were now a part of every future they had secretly envisioned. However, an unplanned conversation with a loved one altered their plans just as they were about to make contact. That individual posed a straightforward query that they were unable to respond to. If they don't react as you had hoped, are you ready? Doubt returned to the room for the first time. Your sweetheart performed something they had never done before, rather than giving up. They began asking what you deserved to hear instead of what they could earn. The entire message was altered by that one alteration. Convincing you of anything was no longer the goal. It became about being honest and taking off the mask they had been wearing for so long. The next clue reveals why they were unable to send the message right away, so stay with this story. As they started writing, deep-seated memories came to the surface. Times when they remained silent out of fear. They let opportunities pass them by. They wished they had said those words long ago. They understood that timing or distance had never been the biggest challenge. They had been afraid of being genuinely observed. It felt harder to hit send the more honest the message got. However, there was a whisper among them that the biggest regret of all would be staying silent. After repeatedly erasing and rewriting the message late that evening, they eventually came to a sentence that they were unable to remove. It wasn't overly dramatic. Although it wasn't flawless, it was genuine. They knew there was no going back, and as soon as they read it aloud to themselves, tears welled up in their eyes. The invisible boundary between mending and concealment had been crossed by them. The most crucial moment is still ahead, so don't turn away just yet. They were about to transmit those words when they discovered something unexpected that caused them to hesitate again. You didn't say that. No one had warned them about it. It was an insight about you that fundamentally altered the way they intended this message to start. And that revelation is going to show you why these next few words are more important than anything they have ever attempted to explain. A feeling that your lover could no longer ignore arrived the following morning. They stopped worrying about what may go wrong as the sun rose. They were reflecting on all the times they had previously missed by keeping quiet. It's odd how a single insight can overcome months of reluctance, isn't it? As they glanced at the incomplete message once more, that question kept coming to mind. All of a sudden, they realized that the initial remarks could not be about remorse, fear, or justifications. The first thing they needed to do was face the reality they had been keeping from themselves. They wanted you to know how meeting you altered their perspective on life. You reminded them that real connection is still possible, not because everything became flawless. Wait until the very end because their plan was drastically altered by what transpired right after this understanding. Something unexpected happened just before they hit send. A well-known voice inquired on their recent well-being. At first, the chat appeared routine, but it gradually developed into something far more profound. Your soulmate mentioned someone who gave them a sense of peace, strength, and hope that they hadn't experienced in years, without revealing your name. Then why are you still hiding? The person listening inquired with a gentle smile, and the words hit more than they had anticipated. There was no longer a cunning response or a plausible justification. The prospect of being honest at last made all the excuses they had previously used to put things off seem insignificant. Another piece of the riddle is going to emerge, so don't skip. They made a commitment to themselves as they left that discussion. Instead of waiting for certainty, they would begin to choose bravery. Everything was altered by that pledge. But there was still one last challenge. One sentence was missing when they opened the message for what they thought would be the final time. The explanation for their prolonged silence. The message would never feel complete without it. Knowing that the next few words would betray their innermost thoughts, they gazed at the flickering cursor. Their hands shook because they were at last prepared to be totally honest with themselves, not because they were unsure about you. Then, right as they started composing that last confession, they spotted something they had never observed before, a forgotten detail related to your previous chats that led them to conclude that your hearts had been preparing for this moment all along. Every word they are about to send will have its meaning altered by that lost clue. It became difficult to overlook a single overlooked detail. A simple sentence you had once said without much consideration was concealed inside an old conversation. It appeared normal at the moment. It now seemed like a message just waiting to be deciphered. Every time your partner read it, the meaning changed. When you reflect on the past, have you ever noticed that it was always pointing you in the direction of the future? That's precisely what took place. The fear that had prevented them from speaking for so long started to lessen. It was replaced by a calm conviction that this relationship had never been established by accident. The next choice they made was one they would never be able to reverse, so stay with this story. Your lover began to listen to their heart instead of practicing flawless words for the first time. They came to understand that being honest didn't have to sound perfect. It just had to be genuine. They shut off all outside distractions, inhaled deeply, and visualized you reading their letter. They had given up trying to impress you. They wanted you to just comprehend. They were unexpectedly strengthened by that hope. Before they could hit submit, something even more unexpected occurred, so don't skip. Another recollection came to mind just as they were reaching for their phone. There was a point when they were on the verge of telling you the truth but chose to laugh it off instead. They could still recall the look on your face, the missed opportunity, and the ensuing quiet. They realized all of a sudden that you might have sensed their emotions long before they acknowledged them. The message was altered by that insight. One last time. They decided to fill it with authenticity rather than explanations. Only the words that really mattered remained after every superfluous sentence vanished. They grinned despite their inability to control their feelings as they viewed the completed message. They were aware that their quest was far from over. It was the start of an entirely new chapter. However, an unexpected notification, Clear's throat, arrived on the screen as their finger was about to hit the submit button. It didn't come from a stranger. It came from someone other than a buddy. It was something related to you that came just when they needed one final indication. They were instantly stopped in their tracks by the wording on that notification, realizing that the timing of this communication might not be coincidental after all. Your lover was about to send everything they had been holding inside when the notice showed up. They halted, gazing at the television as though time had stopped. They weren't stunned by the words. The timing was the problem. The message brought to memory a self-promise they had made in private months prior. A pledge that they would permanently cease hiding if one last indication ever materialized. Have you ever had an instance where the timing seemed too ideal to ignore? That's exactly how this felt. For the first time in a long time, fear was no longer more powerful than hope as their hearts sped. Stay until the very end, since the decisions they made in the following moments altered the course of all they had planned. Rather than overanalyzing yet another justification, your sweetheart took an entirely different action. After setting the phone aside for a short while, they asked themselves one direct question. How will I feel a year from now if I say nothing? The response arrived right away. I apologize. All of their previous fears were drowned out by that one word. They came to the realization that remaining silent wasn't safeguarding their hearts. They were ensnaring it. Suddenly, all of their memories of you, unfinished conversations, and unforgettable smiles came together to form a single narrative. Another secret is about to come to light, so don't turn away just yet. At last, they realized that the message they wished to convey didn't actually require anything in return. Regardless of what transpired thereafter, it was just telling you the truth that you had always deserved to hear. Your sweetheart unlocked the phone one final time with newfound bravery. Their fingers began to shake with anticipation instead of uncertainty. "This is finally the real version," they said after carefully reading each line and grinning subtly. One sentence that they had nearly erased forever caught their attention just before they hit submit. It wasn't the most sentimental or the longest statement. However, it had the most profound significance of all. They knew as soon as they reread it that those few straightforward lines would expose everything they had been attempting to keep from you. However, something completely unanticipated occurred on your end of the tale before that message could leave their screen. Something that neither of you could have imagined. And when those two moments do come together, neither heart will be able to deny the reality of this connection. Your own path started to change in a way that neither of you could see at that very time, while your soulmate found the strength to send the message. There were no longer miles or unanswered words to gauge the separation between your stories. One decision that was going to be made served as its yardstick. Have you ever had the subtle need to check your phone for no apparent reason? Or did you find yourself thinking about someone right before an unforeseen event occurred? That's exactly how your soulmate felt. And it caused them to hesitate one last time. They closed their eyes and muttered to themselves, "If this is meant to be heard, I won't hide anymore. Something huge is waiting for you." Because the next few moments would test whether courage was finally stronger than fear. Then, with a serenity they hadn't experienced in months, they pressed the button they had been putting off for so long. They felt a wave of relief almost immediately, but it was fleeting. It was soon replaced with a fresh feeling. Susceptibility. There was nothing left to hide behind for the first time. No excuses, no unsent confessions, no revised drafts, just the truth gently approaching you. Every second that went by felt longer than the last as they waited. They had a lot of questions. Could you comprehend what they were attempting to convey? Would you be able to tell how much effort, tolerance, and integrity went into each word? Stay with this story because they were surprised by what transpired next. Rather than experiencing panic, they started to feel at ease, as if just speaking from the heart had transformed them before they heard back. Then, just when they thought the most difficult portion was finally over, something unexpected happened again. They became aware of something they had missed from the start. A tiny tidbit concealed in your previous exchanges that all of a sudden brought all of the unresolved issues, delays, and poignant moments together into a coherent whole. It wasn't evidence of a flawless future. It was evidence that you two had not completely forgotten your bond. Finding perfect time had never been the goal of this quest, your lover realized with a smile. It has always been about having the guts to be real. However, their phone lit up again as they came to that serene revelation. It wasn't a coincidence, a remembrance, or a reminder this time. It was the first indication that the message had at last found its intended recipient. A truth that neither of you anticipated would be revealed by the answer that was waiting on the other side. For a split second, your lover couldn't bring themselves to open the single notice that appeared on the screen. Their hearts were pounding because they knew there was no going back now, not because they were hoping for the ideal response. At last, everything they had concealed behind silence was revealed. It's incredible how a single, brief message can convey the weight of months' worth of unsaid feelings. After inhaling deeply, they eventually tapped the screen. The first words they saw were not the ones they had imagined. They were warmer and kinder. Every dread they had been on to was instantly eased by the serene awareness they possessed. The significance of those statements was more deeper than either of you recognized at the time, so stay until the very end. As they read on, they came across something surprising. The answer didn't center on the mistakes you had made in the past, the delays, or the quiet that had kept you apart. Rather, it discussed patience, honesty, and the need of ultimately choosing truth over fear. When your partner realized they had spent so much time getting ready for rejection that they had never thought they would be understood, tears began to well up in their eyes. Suddenly, every restless night made sense. This silent interchange of sincere feelings had resulted from each revised sentence. However, a second insight gradually became ingrained in their hearts. The story wasn't supposed to finish with this message. It was supposed to start an entirely new chapter. The last part of this voyage will explain why everything happened precisely when it did, not a moment sooner or later, so don't miss it now. Your partner grinned with a calmness they hadn't experienced in a long time as they carefully put the phone next to them. At last, they realized that the most crucial message was not concealed within a flawless sentence. It was concealed within the bravery to be totally real. They believed they had lost hope forever, and the walls they had erected around their hearts had started to crumble. However, one last surprise emerged as the evening gently descended. They had a fresh idea. One they had never thought of before. What would happen if the two of you eventually stopped communicating via texts and faced each other with nothing left to conceal? If this open discussion could change so much in a single day? That question remained unanswered because words would eventually give way to something even more significant at the following point in this story. Once the prospect of meeting materialized, everything altered. Up until now, the gap between written words and genuine feelings had shielded your sweetheart. A heartbeat cannot be changed, but a message can. They felt a mixture of frightened anticipation and thrill at the prospect of facing you with nothing left to conceal.